Hi, I'm Doug King with Presence, and I'm here with Dr. Kurt Johnson discussing the exciting new topic of the coming interspiritual age, a book which he has also co-authored with David Ord. Kurt, great to be with you today.
Good to be here, Doug.
You know, this interspiritual movement was something that just caught my eye within the last year, and I saw it on some websites that had to do with spiral dynamics and those folks that are consulting on a global basis, and it really caught their eye. And I am, in that sense, kind of a newbie to this movement. I'm wondering if you could perhaps give us a background and a history and a little bit of the depth of this movement, where it came from and how it got here.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is that even though the term interspirituality is new, it was coined in 1999 by a Roman Catholic thinker, Brother Wayne Teasdale. What has actually been the movement toward this global understanding of a universal spirituality within the world's religions, and an emerging sense of a universal spirituality that points to shared heart, shared ethic, and shared legacy of all the peoples of the world, has actually been a process that's been going on for centuries and then ratcheting up in the last 200 years, and particularly the last decades. Now, first of all, if you go to a website like www.isdna.org or www.thecominginterspiritualage.com, the first thing you're going to see is a list of what's called interspiritual pioneers. And you're going to see that they span centuries and they span all of the traditions. And what they were people within the developing religious traditions who, even while the great religions and spiritual traditions were being founded themselves, were already looking beyond to what all of these experiences had in common. So we had many early voices, both in the East and in the West. But what's interesting then is that after the phenomenon known as World War II, and the world naturally went toward being a planetary civilization because of the implications of what had happened in that war, and that problems needed to be solved and addressed at a global level. Then this conversation even amped up to another level of what is the relationship of all these parochial traditions as we become a global society. And that's basically what we see as the emergence of the interfaith movement. And the commonality then that there had to be some type of dialogue and discussion across religions in the interest of peace and tolerance and mutuality. But then we came to a historical event that's known as Vatican II. And Vatican II was very, very interesting because then you had the Roman Catholic faith, which was really maybe the most pivotally large and well-positioned religion in the world, at least in the Western world, which was the hub of economics and the first world as far as development went, basically opening the invitation for the traditions to begin to speak to each other. And what was unique about it is there was a group called the Foundationalist Theologians who stood up. Some of their names you will know: Hans Küng, Thomas Merton, many other well-known names, Harvey Cox, and began to address this conversation, interestingly enough, from Christianity to the other religions. And chiming into that, because the invitation was there, soon enough, the other religions started to then enter this conversation. And the reason that they took the term the foundationalist discussion is that they were asking themselves, what is the common foundation among the experiences that we've had in consciousness, in heart, in ethics, and in values, that aside from our stories, our theological, creedal, doctrinal stories, or even claims about absolute truth, that these other elements that were held in common at the level of our humanity, right, and kind of who we have to be as we become this global civilization. Now then there was just really one more step. As long as this conversation was arising, and of course the Dalai Lama is one of the most famous people who was early then as the 50s and 60s, was a major part of this conversation, was moving the conversation even to a deeper level among all the contemplatives, monastics, mystics in the world, who were looking at the deepest of what they had experienced, of what their spiritual practice, where it took them. And they were also then sharing the same conclusion, that what comes from that deepest experience is not a theological experience necessarily, not a religious experience necessarily, but it's a deep, artistic, consciousness-based human experience that allows me to say, I and the other are one. We are all people under one roof, under one God, whatever term we use. But this sense of that emerging interconnectedness. Now, the other thread here, which I find very interesting, that if you look at what was going on in science, and particularly in the emergence of cognitive study of evolution and brain mind, if you even look at all the Nobel Prizes in the 50s and 60s that went to brain mind studies, most of the understanding that was emerging through those studies as well was that humankind was emerging into a new lens that had to do with interconnectedness, oneness, the meaning of a collective. And so actually what had happened then, if you looked historically, let's say from the time of the Renaissance, the reason I say all this because it shows how we've all landed in the conversation. Right. And how even the people who in your tradition are the ones who have elucidated this story, like the work of your father, they've all been a part of starting to tell this story of what it means that all of these rivers are flowing the same direction. So the cognitive scientists were saying, just as in the Renaissance and after, the idea of the individual and the value of the individual arose, peaking, for instance, with the Declaration of Independence, which simply said the value of the individual is a self-evident truth. Yes. Now, for 70 centuries of church-state totalitarianism, this would have been unheard of. So now what cognitive scientists are saying, just as that arose in the analytical consciousness, which was people, let's say in the medieval universities, saying, look, I have my own ideas and my ideas matter. No matter what the Pope says, no matter what the Prince or the King says, I have my ideas and my ideas matter. That became a self-evident truth as of the revolutions in France, America, and so on. And now cognitive scientists are saying we're at a threshold now, call it we, call it the collective, but we're at a threshold now of what emerges in seeing what it profoundly means to be interconnected at a societal level in a global age. So I know when our talks about the pioneer work of your father, there were all of these precursor people who saw this vision way in advance.
Yes.
Aurobindo, Teilhard,
yes.
Merton, even at the beginning of those people who then became, Teasdale and Griffiths and all the other pioneers that came after. But there have been people who mined into this early on. And what they can feel good about is this is really the fulfillment of their work. This is the seeing of the fruits of the vision that they had. Whether they were off in a cave alone, or they were off in a study at a seminary writing radical theology alone, they were actually not alone. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. Certainly everyone has their own path and their own journey, and everyone has a story about the way that either they or people that came before them have contributed to this movement. And you mentioned my dad, Max King. He certainly has been one who, in his first work, which was published in 1971, and continues to work into his older years, as one that understands that this also takes from all of us that are going to be in this kind of a movement, it takes courage, because needless to say, there is resistance anytime you bring a new step, a change, or something that is going to come along with evolution. Evolution is also going to be the rubbing of plates. It's going to create lava that flows, and for anyone who is in this movement, of course, it means that it gives us a chance to be courageous in that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I appreciate very much you taking time to give us a background and a history of that, and of course both of us would say to everyone out there who is wanting to participate in this that you can look your fear in the eye. You can go where your heart, head, and passion take you, and everyone is welcome in this new interspiritual age. Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.